Let's just get this right out there, right at the front. Not every episode can be about 7 of 9, Janeway or the Doctor. Leave some room for the rest of them. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for Trek Culture, and here are the 10 best Star Trek Voyager episodes not about the main cast. Number 10, Q2. Keegan Delancey, son of John Delancey, guest stars in this episode as the junior Q who had been introduced in The Q and the Grey. That episode where John Delancey's Q walked around with a massive horn on him for the entire episode, begging Janeway for a bit of that sweet sweet. She didn't give it to him. Good on you, Janeway. However, the wonderful Susie Plaxon did, therefore we get a junior Q. And the episode is surprisingly good. Keegan, who obviously has a great chemistry with his dad both on and off screen, is a really strangely fun and solid addition to the, I suppose I want to say crew, even though I'm pretty sure Janeway wouldn't want to say crew, but he does get on very well, surprisingly, with Icheb. He's also an adolescent in every basically version of that. He's also walking around with a horn on him. And there is that great scene where he uses his powers to whoosh Seven's clothes away, and she doesn't even let it make her blink. And it's a great scene to kind of remind him, okay, you've got loads of powers, I don't care. There's a lot of fun back and forth between him and Itchy before eventually he is taught how to be a bit of a grown-up by Janeway and rewarded by Q. It's just a nice, solid episode, low stakes, good fun. Number 9, Child's Play. Ever since the arrival of the Borg children in Star Trek Voyager, 7 of 9 had started to become more of a maternal figure. Now, we'd seen 7 in a motherly position back in season 5's episode, Drone. Now, this episode really does center on the relationship between 7 and Icheb, but told from Icheb's point of view. They discover his home planet where he's actually from, and, you know, in a way they're delighted. Great, you know, the prodigal son returns home, liberated from the collective. You would assume fantastic. They find his parents, guest starring Mark Shepard, who's also appeared on things like Doctor Who and Firefly, and of course Battlestar Galactica, and the stage seems set for an emotional farewell between Icheb and his foster mother 7. Yeah, things don't go that way. The next thing Voyager knows, Icheb's been knocked out, stuck on a shuttle, and sent toward a Borg transwarp aperture as something like a sacrifice to the collective. It's a grim discovery because you can understand why his parents have done it. Every few centuries, the Borg turn up and wipe out whatever progress they've done. The only way to keep them at bay is to make an offering. So, rock in a hard place. Now, Voyager comes in and saves Icheb, alright, but a bit ambiguous what's going to happen to the planet after Voyager warps away. Number 8, Ashes to Ashes. Ah, do you remember Lindsay Ballard? Oh, she was, I tell you, all those episodes in season 1, no, sorry, all those episodes in season 2, 3? Surely 4. Yeah, so no one's ever heard of Ensign Lindsay Ballard, but I guess we all miss her because when she rocks up again to Voyager, everyone's very shocked. Especially her boyfriend, Harry Kim, who did all of that time of grieving for her. Turns out that after she was killed on an away mission and buried in space, as Voyager is wont to do, Lindsay Ballard was actually brought back to life. Now, the alien race that has, I suppose, taken over her body, this is how they reproduce. Technically, no one's using the body, so why not recycle it? That's their logic. Now, Ballard retains some of her memories from Voyager. I'm glad someone does, because I certainly don't. But she then travels back to the ship and she's like, hey, I'm home. Why are you all freaked out? She goes through gene reversion therapy and the doctor tells her, it's gonna have to be an injection every single day for the rest of your life to remain looking human. She begins to reject this reversion therapy. Her alien DNA starts to take over again, and she's left in, again, a bit of a rough spot. Herself and Harry try and decide what to do, and eventually she decides that she is now so different that to go back to being a member of the crew on Voyager is something that's not particularly feasible for her. There's a bit of an emotional goodbye with Harry, but really it was a good idea, and had they done something like this for Hess, for example, then there might have been a bit of a greater payoff. Having said that, it's still quite a heartwarming bottle show all the same. Number 7, Flashback. Let's just get this out of the way straight away. The framing story means nothing in this episode. Okay, Tuvok's got a virus. The virus jumps from person to person. Nobody actually cares because this episode is about George Takei and Grace Lee Whitney. Who didn't love seeing the bridge of the Excelsior reproduced beautifully, I might add, on Voyager? And we see Janeway in one of the Monster Maroon uniforms. We see Tuvok again in one of the Monster Maroon uniforms. I maintain he was wearing ear prosthetics in Star Trek Generations when it was definitely Tuvok serving the Enterprise B, fight me. But this episode was Voyager's counter-offer to, say, Trials and Tribulations. It was all for the 30th anniversary for Star Trek, and it was just as a way to celebrate the franchise as a whole. Now, where this one is different, say, from Trials and Tribulations was predominantly archive footage. This, you have George Takei and Grace Lee Whitney actually came back, along with many of the actors from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. It was fun, it was silly. There's no point to the Voyager storyline. This was about seeing the USS Excelsior, seeing Michael and Sarah come back as Kang, seeing a beautiful, beautiful Klingon Katinga-class battle cruiser. Flashback is just fun. It is zero stakes, there is no carryover, none of that matters, just enjoy it. Number 6, 11:59. Now, this one is a cheat. I know it's a cheat because Kate Mulgrew is the big star of this episode, but she's not playing Janeway. So I get that it's a cheat, okay? Now, Shannon O'Donnell, who is Janeway's ancestor, is said to be a huge inspiration for her to eventually go off and start working in space. O'Donnell was said to have been part of the Millennium Gate building, which was a huge, very reminiscent of Farpoint Station structure on Earth that could be seen from space, which was, you guessed it from the title, built around the time of the Millennium. Shannon O'Donnell is tasked with getting Henry Janeway to agree to sell up his shop, his old bookshop, because he's the only store owner holding out, which is stopping production on this gate. It's a chance to see our regular out of their normal environment. There is a framing story on Voyager, which is actually a bit fun and works a bit better than the framing story in Flashback. But really, it just gives us a chance to see Kate Mulgrew just do something different and show us her range. Again, not entirely sure if this qualifies. I like this episode a lot, and I hope you'll give me a pass. Number 5, Concerning Flight. John Rhys-Davies, Leonardo da Vinci, Delta Quadrant, sold. This is so silly. This is like a reverse holodeck episode because the hologram comes out of the holodeck and finds himself in modern Star Trek universe. And of course, Da Vinci, who is one of the greatest inventors of all time, hope that statement doesn't age like milk, is just so much fun. He thinks that this planet that he's been sent down to is America because it's so futuristic, and they've even managed to harness the power of a lightning storm and propel it from his hand because he fires a phaser. It's just gas. Voyager comes under attack from some pirates who steal a lot of their technology, including the main computer, but also including the Doctor's mobile emitter, which allows for the Da Vinci story to actually happen on the planet. Again, low stakes, high farce. Even when they're playing it serious, it's funny because Da Vinci can only understand the world around him through the context of the time that he's supposed to be from. So, therefore, he's a bit freaked when it comes to phasers and aliens and all of that kind of thing. And yet he rolls with it because, you know, go on my man Da Vinci. The finale that sees him finally successfully use his flying contraption with Janeway, it's just a delight. Concerning Flight is a 4th season episode. It comes not long after a year of hell, so it helps to really bring the mood up again in this season of Voyager, and it is honestly a great episode. Number 4, DEATHWISH. Now, we're going to pivot a hard left away from comedy here, and we're going to go to one of the most serious episodes that Voyager ever produced. And I don't mean serious in the way that the Siege of AR-558 from DS9 was serious. I mean that the topics raised in this episode are really, really heavy. Voyager comes into contact with the Q continuum for the first time in the 2nd season episode. They meet John Delancey's traditional Q, for want of a better word. They also meet Garrett Graham's Quinn. He has been imprisoned in a comet or asteroid for all of eternity because he wants to die. And that is anathema to being a Q. Janeway agrees to hold a hearing for an asylum, and there is a little bit of comedy in which Q calls himself to the stand, and effectively he discusses the merits and effects that Quinn has had on important people throughout history. He calls Sir Isaac Newton, he calls Allen Ginsberg, and he calls Commander Riker for a little bit of a crossover there with the Next Gen as well. It's fun, but it's also a really interesting point, is that Quinn, through his actions, has managed to save and ensure history. He uses Riker as the example that by saving Riker's grandfather, Thaddeus Riker, or great-grandfather, Thaddeus possibly great-great-grandfather, he's in there somewhere, he ensured the line continued, therefore Riker could exist to save the Federation from the Borg. Quinn counters with, once you've seen everything and done everything, should you not have control over your own fate? To force one to exist simply for the sake of existing is a cruelty on its own terms, or so he argues. Janeway does eventually rule in Quinn's favor, but she implores him, now that he has mortality, to live a finite life. Quinn jumps the gun and he takes poison provided to him by Q because the ideas that Quinn espoused have far-reaching consequences for the Q continuum. Number 3, Pathfinder. For the bulk of this episode, we're really following Dwight Schultz's Reginald Barclay. Now, you'll know from watching videos on this channel that we have a very soft spot for Barclay here. As the years have gone by, he's been reassessed. While he could have been seen as quite an annoying character on The Next Generation at the time of airing, actually what we've seen is a man who was crippled by his anxieties and his inner demons to the point where he had a lot of social anxiety. Now that's something that we understand a lot better in today's modern age. Bringing him over onto Voyager was actually a chance to again re-depict him, if you like, because for a lot of this episode it looks like he's regressed to his holo addiction. He spends most of his time with the Voyager crew on the holodeck as he is attempting to work out the kinks on the Midas array, which will allow Starfleet to speak in real time to Voyager. Now, while this is a triumph for the Voyager crew in that they do get to speak to Admiral Paris and Barclay, this episode really is Reg Barclay's hour. It is a massive success for him. It's a great confidence boost for him, and it works because we followed him from The Next Generation through into Voyager. So when he has that final toast with Deanna Troi at the end of this episode, we can all appreciate this is a truly special moment. Number 2, MELD. Now, there is an easy argument to say that this really is Tim Russ's episode because although this was a second season episode, I believe he has never been better as Tuvok. He was fantastic in this episode. He really embodied the character perfectly. However, as the main impetus and drive for this episode, Brad Dourif really stands out as crewman Lon Suder. Lon Suder is a Betazoid who came with Chakotay and the rest of the Maquis to become a part of Voyager's crew. He then murdered another crewman for no reason. He's hindered somewhat in that, although he's a Betazoid who should feel everything, he in fact feels nothing. He is essentially a sociopath. And this really confuses Tuvok, who needs there to be a motive. There has to be a motive to this killing. This leads to the titular MELD, which leads to some fairly surprising side effects for both of them. Tuvok begins to lose control over his emotions. Now, there's many jokes to be said about Vulcans and cold and logic and everything, but actually there is a physiological effect on him that is very dangerous for him to lose those kinds of controls. On the other hand, Lon Suder is able to finally begin to control his rage, and that is almost as chilling as, for want of a better word, evil Suder from the start of the episode, because so quickly he gains a perspective that he didn't have before. I cannot begin to laud Dourif enough for his performance in this episode. He really is brilliant here. It's a shame that his storyline was so short on Voyager because he is truly a fascinating guest star. Number 1, Distant Origin. Now, not only is this one of the best episodes of Star Trek Voyager centering around someone who isn't part of the main cast, it's frankly one of the best episodes of Star Trek overall because it is pure Star Trek. It is a morality tale that Gene Roddenberry would have been very, very proud of. Professor Gagan is a Voth scientist who is effectively trying to prove his theory, or his hypothesis I should say, that their species didn't originate in the Delta Quadrant. Now, the clues that he's following lead him to the remains of crewman Hogan, who was on the planet that the Voyager landed on Basics. It gets him to understand that actually humanity and the Voth have a shared, if not ancestry, then certainly they shared digs when they were young, because the Voth evolved from hadrosaurs, and specifically Parasaurolophus, one of the dinosaurs that we all probably recognize from the Lost World Jurassic Park. However, Gagan is effectively Galileo here, because what he is saying is considered heresy by the rest of his people, and he will be silenced, and he will be shut down for this, because it's against doctrine, and his people are not ready to hear this. We only get Chakotay's point of view mostly for the episode. Now, we get a little bit of the rest of the crew, obviously, when Voyager is beamed inside the Voth city ship. It is a true tale of the power of science being silenced. It's the power of belief in both scientific belief and religious belief and how they can clash. And also, at the end, there is a hopeful moment at the end where Gagan says that although he's had to publicly recant, he's had to say all of these things, the fact that he still believes in the truth means that he can pass that on, they can pass that on, and in time, his people might come to understand who they really are. That's it for our list today, guys. If you reckon we missed anyone off this list, then please drop it into the comments below. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember that you can catch us over on Twitter at Trek Culture. You can catch myself at Sean Ferrick as well. Now, whether you are a main star or a simple guest of the week, live long and prosper. Thanks, guys.